All right, so you want that dream programming job, right? The one at one of those top tech companies, the ones that are like shaping the future.
Definitely. It's a common goal for many aspiring developers.
It is, and we're here to help you get there. We're going to deep dive into this awesome article called Creating a Study Plan for Coding Interviews, a comprehensive guide.
Sounds great. It's a fantastic resource packed with the practical advice.
Yeah, and we're not just aiming for you to like scrape by. We want you to really get this stuff so you can have a crazy successful career in tech.
Absolutely. It's about building a deep understanding, not just memorizing solutions. It's like, really understanding how software development works.
Right, exactly. And the article starts off strong with this super important first step. It calls it self-assessment. So before you even dive into algorithms or data structures, you got to know where you stand, right?
Yeah, it's about being honest with yourself about what you're good at and where you might need to, brush up a little.
So like taking inventory of your coding toolkit before you start building. Yeah.
I like that analogy. It's like, you wouldn't try to run a marathon without knowing how far you can run right now, would you?
Haha. Definitely not. So how do we actually go about this self-assessment? The article mentions online coding assessments. Are those a good place to start?
Definitely. Websites like HackerRank and LeetCode are awesome for that. They give you a real-world feel, like you're actually in a coding interview.
Oh, that's cool. So you get to test your skills in a realistic environment.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, you get to see how efficient your code is, how well you handle those tricky edge cases.
Edge cases. Can you remind me what those are again? It's been a while since my computer science classes.
Sure, no problem. So let's say you're writing code to sort a list of numbers. An edge case would be something like, what happens if the list is empty? Or what if it contains duplicate numbers?
Got it. So it's those weird scenarios that you might not think about right away.
Exactly. It's about thinking through all those possibilities so your code doesn't crash and burn when it encounters something unexpected.
Okay, so online assessments for that real world feel. Edge case checking. What else is part of this self-assessment thing?
Oh, and don't forget about revisiting those core computer science concepts.
Yeah.
The stuff you might not have touched in a while. Data structures, algorithms, time and space complexity, the foundational stuff.
Oh, yeah, those classic computer science textbooks gathering dust on the shelf. Time to blow those off.
Uh-huh, exactly. But it's not about memorizing definitions. It's about understanding how they translate to real-world coding.
So it's like knowing what a hammer is one thing, but actually using it to build something is a whole other skill, right?
Yeah, exactly. Nailed it.
Awesome. Okay, so we've taken stock of our strengths and weaknesses. We've dusted off those core concepts. What's the next step in this coding adventure?
Well, now it's time to set some goals and timelines. You know, get specific about what you want to achieve.
Oh, so it's like going from this vague idea of I want a job to actually defining what success looks like.
Totally. Do you want to work on a certain kind of project? Are there specific companies you're aiming for?
Right, because different companies probably look for different things, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. Some might prioritize problem-solving skills, while others might be all about a specific programming language. Figuring out what they want will help you tailor your prep.
Makes sense. So it's like planning a trip. You wouldn't pack a swimsuit if you're going to the Arctic.
Haha, exactly. Researching your target companies is key. And while you're at it, set a target date too.
Oh, a deadline.
Yeah. I know deadlines can be kind of scary, but trust me, having a concrete date in mind can be super motivating.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. It's like a launch date for your coding career rocket.
I love that analogy.
Hmm.
And don't forget, big goals are less intimidating when you break them down into smaller steps.
Right. So instead of like master all of computer science by next month, it's more like, okay, this week I'm conquering linked lists.
Exactly.
Eh.
Celebrate those small wins, they build momentum.
All right, I'm feeling pumped. We've checked our coding toolkit, we've got our target locked, and a timeline set. What's next? What's the next step in this whole process?
Well, now it's time to build that coding curriculum. Think of it like the syllabus for your coding bootcamp.
Ooh, I like that. Time to hit the books. Or, I guess, the online tutorials.
Haha, exactly. And guess what's at the top of the list? The absolute essentials for those coding interviews.
Let me guess. Data structures and algorithms.
You got it.
Yeah.
They're like the bread and butter of coding interviews, the foundation for building awesome software.
Okay, I'll admit, sometimes I hear those terms and my brain kind of freezes up. Can we do a quick refresher on what those are all about?
Sure, no problem. Think of data structures as different ways of organizing information. Like an array is a neatly ordered list, While a linked list is more like a chain where each link leads to the next.
Okay, starting to come back to me now.
Yeah.
And algorithms are like the actions you perform on that data.
Exactly. Algorithms are the steps you take to manipulate that information, like sorting it, searching it, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. But why are these things so crucial for coding interviews? I mean, beyond just knowing the definitions, I guess.
Because they're the building blocks for efficient and scalable software. Like, imagine you're building a search engine. You need to be able to store and retrieve billions of web pages super quickly, and data structures and algorithms help you do that.
So it's about applying those concepts to solve real-world problems, which is what those interviews are all about.
Exactly. And the article we are looking at does a great job of giving you real-world examples to help you understand how this stuff is used in practice.
Awesome. Okay, we've got our data structures, our algorithms. What else is on the curriculum menu?
Well, the article also talks about problem-solving techniques. These are like strategic approaches for tackling those tricky interview questions.
Oh, cool. So it's not just about knowing the code, it's about how you think about the problem itself, right?
You got it. Techniques like the two-pointer approach or the sliding window technique can be super helpful for solving those problems efficiently.
It's like having a secret toolbox of coding tricks. Can you give me an example of how one of those techniques works?
Sure. Imagine you have an array of numbers, and you need to find the largest sum of any two consecutive numbers. Instead of checking every possible pair, which can be really time-consuming, you can use a sliding window.
A sliding window. What's that?
Basically, you imagine a window of a certain size moving across the array, and you keep track of the largest sum you see within that window.
Ah, that's clever. So it's about finding those shortcuts, those more elegant solutions.
Exactly. And the cool thing is that these techniques are transferable. They'll make you a better programmer in general, not just for interviews.
Okay, that's great to hear. So data structures, algorithms, problem-solving techniques. What else is on this coding syllabus?
For those of you aiming for senior roles or specific companies, the article also mentions system design. This is where things get really interesting.
System design, like designing an entire system from scratch.
Well, it's not always from scratch, but yeah, it's about thinking big picture. Scalability, reliability, performance. Like you might be asked to design something like a social media platform or a ride-sharing app.
Wow, that sounds pretty intense. Are we talking about like building the next Google search here?
Well, maybe not that complex, but it does involve thinking about those large-scale challenges. And the article provides a good overview of the essentials, like load balancing and database design.
Okay, so we're going from writing lines of code to designing systems that could potentially handle millions of users. Pretty mind-blowing.
It is. And it's an area that a lot of aspiring developers overlook, which is a shame because it's so crucial for anyone wanting to build real-world, large-scale applications.
System design, noted. Okay, what else do we need on our coding curriculum checklist?
Well, next up, programming languages. The article suggests picking one or two to really focus on during your prep.
Right, it's about quality over quantity, right? Better to master a few than to kind of know a bunch of them.
Exactly. Choose languages that align with the roles and companies you're interested in and that you feel most comfortable with.
So if I'm dreaming of working at a company that uses a lot of Python, I should probably brush up on my Python skills.
Exactly. But ultimately, the best language is the one you feel most confident and comfortable using. It's about expressing your coding thoughts clearly and effectively.
Got it. Choose your weapon wisely. Speaking of weapons, what about object-oriented programming? That's another term that makes my head spin sometimes.
It can be a bit intimidating at first, but object-oriented programming, or OOP, is a super important paradigm for building reusable and maintainable code. It's all about thinking of code as objects that interact with each other.
Objects, like physical objects.
Not quite, but sort of. Think of it this way. Imagine you're building a game. You could have objects like a player, an enemy, a weapon. Each object has its own properties and behaviors.
Oh, okay. So the player object might have properties like health points and attack power, and behaviors like moving and attacking.
Exactly. OP lets you organize your code in a way that's modular and reusable, which makes it easier to maintain and extend your code base.
OOP, got it. And last but not least, on our coding syllabus checklist, we have databases and SQL.
You bet. Databases are all about storing and managing data, and SQL is the language we use to talk to them.
So if I want to find all the books about coding interviews in a library, SQL is like the librarian who helps me find them.
Exactly. It's a super valuable skill, especially for jobs that involve working with lots of data.
Databases and SQL, check. Okay, we've covered so much already, it feels like we've mapped out the entire coding interview landscape. What's next on this adventure?
Well, now that we've got our curriculum all laid out, it's time to talk about how to actually learn all this stuff. And the article has some fantastic suggestions for making your study time as effective as possible.
Awesome. I'm ready to level up my learning game. Bring on those study strategies.
Okay, so we've got this awesome coding curriculum all mapped out. But how do we actually learn all this stuff and make it stick? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's one thing to have a list of topics, but actually absorbing all that information, that's the real challenge.
Right. Exactly. And the article actually dives into some super cool strategies for making your study time really effective. One of my favorite tips is all about active learning. So it's not just about like passively reading textbooks or watching videos. It's about getting your hands dirty, really engaging with the material.
Active learning. I like the sound of that. It's like we're not just students, we're coding explorers, forging our own path to knowledge.
I love that analogy.
Mm.
And one of the best ways to do this is by actually implementing data structures and algorithms from scratch. So instead of just relying on those built-in libraries, try coding them yourself.
Oh, wow. That sounds challenging. But I can see how that would force you to really understand what's going on under the hood.
Exactly. It's like taking apart an engine to see how all the pieces fit together.
Yeah.
You might not be able to build a car from scratch after that, but you'll have a much deeper understanding of how it works.
Okay, coding from scratch. Challenge accepted. What other active learning techniques does the article suggest?
Another really good one is teaching. Find a study buddy, a mentor, or even just like an imaginary rubber duck, and explain the concepts you're learning to them.
Haha, I love the rubber duck idea. I've actually heard that's a classic debugging technique.
Yeah. It is, and it works wonders for learning, too. When you have to explain something to someone else, even if it's just a rubber duck, it forces you to really think it through, and identify any gaps in your understanding.
So teaching is like a knowledge multiplier. You learn more by sharing what you know.
Exactly. And it also helps you build those communication skills, which are so important for acing those interviews.
Okay, teaching. Check. What other active learning gems are in this article?
Well, the article also recommends documenting your journey. So write blog posts, keep a journal, create your own notes, whatever works for you. It's a really good way to solidify your understanding and revisit your learning process. And, maybe even help other people who are on the same path.
Ah, so it's like creating your own coding grimoire, filled with spells and incantations to summon the perfect algorithm for any occasion.
Uh-huh. I love that analogy. And it's also a great way to build your online presence and show off your passion for coding, to potential employers.
Coding grimoire check. Any other active learning tips before we move on?
Just one more. Participating in coding competitions. Platforms like Codeforces or Topcoder are a super fun way to test your skills against others, get used to that timed pressure, and just generally expand your problem-solving horizons.
Coding competitions. Sounds intense, but I'm up for the challenge. Okay, so we've got all these awesome active learning strategies in our toolbox now. What's next on our path to coding mastery?
Practice.
Ah, the 3 Ps of coding success. Practice, practice, practice. I'm guessing the article has some pointers on how to make the most of our practice time.
It does. And it all starts with solving coding problems every single day. Start with the easier ones to build confidence and then gradually ramp up the difficulty as you improve.
So it's like a coding workout regimen. You start with lighter weights and gradually increase the load as your coding muscles get stronger.
Exactly. And to really simulate that interview pressure, the article suggests incorporating timed practice sessions. So set a timer, pick a problem, and go.
Timed practice sounds a bit nerve-wracking, but I can see how that would be really helpful for getting used to thinking on my feet, under pressure.
It's like training for a coding marathon. You need to build up that mental stamina to go the distance.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So daily problems, timed practice, what else is on the practice menu?
We can't forget about mock interviews. Grab a friend, a mentor, or use online platforms like Pramp to practice your coding and communication skills under pressure.
Mock interviews, they're like dress rehearsals for the real deal.
Exactly. It's your chance to iron out any kinks, refine your explanations, and just generally get comfortable with the whole interview flow.
Okay, mock interviews, check. Anything else we can do to really maximize our practice time?
One last thing, and it's super important. Always review and optimize your solutions. So it's not enough to just get the code working. It's about thinking critically about your approach, finding ways to improve it, and striving for that elegance and efficiency.
So it's like those cooking shows where they have a tasting round and the chefs tweak their recipes based on the feedback.
Exactly. It's all about continuous improvement. always pushing yourself to be a better coder.
Review and optimize. Check. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about active learning, consistent practice, becoming coding optimization ninjas. Anything else we need to know before we unleash our newfound coding skills on the world?
One crucial element that often gets overlooked in the frenzy of coding prep, the human element.
Ah, the human element. I was wondering when we'd get to that. After all, coding is ultimately about solving human problems, right?
Right, exactly. And while those technical skills are obviously super important, you're not just interacting with a computer during an interview, you're interacting with people.
That's a good point. It's easy to get so caught up in the code that we forget about the human beings on the other side of the table.
Exactly. And so, in addition to all that technical prep, the article really stresses the importance of communication skills, showcasing your passion, and just generally, being a likable human being.
So how do we do that? How do we avoid becoming those stereotypical, awkward coder types who can't, string a sentence together outside of a terminal window?
Uh-huh. Well, first of all, remember to think out loud during the problem-solving process. So it's not just about showing them the final code. It's about taking them on the journey of how you got there.
Oh, so it's about like narrating your thought process, explaining your logic and showing them how your brain works, basically.
Exactly. It gives them a window into your problem-solving abilities and helps them understand how you approach challenges. And speaking of understanding, don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions.
Clarifying questions. Isn't that like a sign of weakness? Like I should already know everything before I walk into that interview room.
Not at all. Asking clarifying questions shows that you're paying attention to detail and that you want to make sure you're solving the right problem. And that you're not afraid to, ask for help when you need it.
Oh, so it's not about trying to like impress them with how much I know. It's about being curious and engaged, making sure I really understand what they're looking for.
Exactly. And interviewers actually appreciate that. It shows that you're thoughtful and that you care about getting things right.
Clarifying questions. Got it. What other human-centric tips does the article have?
Another good one is developing a problem-solving framework. It's a structured approach to breaking down any coding problem into manageable steps.
A framework. I love frameworks. They make everything seem so much more organized and less overwhelming.
Right. Having a framework not only helps you solve problems more effectively, but it also shows interviewers that you have a systematic approach, which is really valuable in any technical role.
So what does this coding problem-solving framework look like? What are the steps involved?
The article suggests a multi-step process that starts with, understanding the problem, then identifying the inputs and outputs, brainstorming a high-level approach, and finally diving into the implementation, testing, and optimization.
Wow, that's a pretty comprehensive framework. It's like having a recipe for tackling any coding challenge.
Exactly. And having a framework like this, it can actually benefit you throughout your whole coding career, not just for interviews.
Problem-solving framework, check. Okay, we've talked about thinking out loud, asking clarifying questions, and developing a framework. Any final thoughts on this human element stuff before we wrap up?
One last super important thing. Don't forget to showcase your passion. Let your enthusiasm shine through, Talk about what you love about coding, what excites you about this particular role, why you'd be an awesome addition to their team.
So it's about showing them that I'm not just a code writing machine. I'm a real human being with passion and excitement for this stuff, right?
Exactly. Let your inner coding geek flag fly. It's infectious, and interviewers love to see it.
Passion, check. Okay, I think we've officially covered all the bases here, from mastering data structures to acing those behavioral questions. What's next on our agenda? Okay, so we're back and ready for the final stretch of our coding interview deep dive. We've covered so much already, from nailing those algorithms to, rocking that human element. I feel like we've unlocked all the secrets to landing that dream programming job.
We've definitely covered a ton, but there are always a few more tricks up our sleeve. The article we've been looking at actually has a whole section on bonus tips, things that can give you that extra edge.
Yeah.
And help you really stand out from the crowd.
Bonus tips. I'm all ears. It's like finding those hidden power-ups in a video game.
Uh-huh, exactly. And one of the most important bonus tips is to constantly refine your study plan.
Refine it. But we already spent all this time crafting the perfect curriculum with all the right topics, resources.
Yeah, true. But the key here is to continuously evaluate and adjust. As you go through your prep, you'll figure out what works best for you, what areas you need to focus on more. You might even discover new resources or techniques you hadn't thought of before.
So it's like a feedback loop. constantly checking in with yourself, seeing what's working, what's not,
Yeah.
tweaking your approach as you learn and grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's an iterative process. Just like, software development itself, you wouldn't release a software product without testing and iterating on it, right?
Right. Okay. That makes total sense. So we're not just like setting a study plan and then forgetting about it. We're actively shaping it, as we learn.
Exactly.
Okay. What other bonus tips does this article have for us?
Another good one is to stay updated with, like industry trends. The tech world moves fast, right? What was a hot skill last year might be old news today.
Oh, for sure. So it's not enough to just master the fundamentals. We got to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening out there.
Exactly. New languages pop up, frameworks evolve. It's all about staying adaptable and showing potential employers that you're like a lifelong learner. You're eager to embrace new challenges.
Staying updated, check. But how do we even keep up with all that change? It feels like drinking from a fire hose sometimes.
It can feel that way, for sure. But there are some really great ways to stay in the loop. Follow industry blogs, subscribe to tech newsletters, go to webinars. You can even just chat with people in online communities, see what they're talking about.
So it's about being a little bit of a coding trendsetter, always on the lookout for the next big thing.
Exactly. And it's not just about chasing trends for the sake of it. It's about showing potential employers that you're passionate, and committed to staying at the forefront of the industry.
Lifelong learning, check. Okay, any other bonus tips before we wrap this up?
One last but super valuable suggestion is to seek feedback from experienced developers or mentors. They can offer insights that you might not see yourself, point out areas for improvement, share their own experiences going through coding interviews.
Oh, that's a great idea. It's like having a coding sensei guiding you on your path to mastery.
Exactly. Having that outside perspective can be so helpful.
Seeking feedback, check. Okay, I think we've officially unlocked all the bonus levels, gathered all the power-ups. I feel like we are ready to take on the coding interview world.
I think so too. And hey, even if you don't land that dream job right away, all the skills and knowledge you gain through this process, they're incredibly valuable. Keep practicing, keep learning, and never lose that passion for what you do.
Well said. This deep dive has been such an amazing journey, and I feel so much more prepared to tackle those coding interviews. Thanks for all the insights.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the world needs more brilliant coders like you. So go out there and, write some awesome code, make your mark on the world.
And that's a wrap on another deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of knowledge.